ISO 45001 isn't just about policies and risk assessments. It's about people. And most companies miss the part that matters most: consultation and participation. And Martin Graham, our COO, will explain why this is a critical but often undervalued topic. Okay, Martin, so what does ISO 45001 actually require when it comes to consultation and participation?
Okay, I think probably the best place to start is maybe the definitions of consultation and participation, because those they can get sort of what's the word, misunderstood, and it's maybe not all that clear to some people. The definitions are actually in the standards. There's the terms and definitions in the front of the standard, but just for the avoidance of any doubt, you've got consultation, which is seeking views of workers, and participation, which is involvement of workers in decision makings. Kind of two key elements there. I think that's kind of really keeping the clause as simple as it can be. So basically get people involved, get their opinions on things, get their input to the process, and then involve them in the decision making process as well when it comes to health and safety matters and the management system overall. And yes, one of the key fundamental elements of it. So.
Why it's only in 45001? Because when you put it like that, it kind of, why is that not in everything? Like all
It's
the
funny
other
actually.
standards.
You won't believe this, and I'm not just saying this. I was having the exact conversation today. It was a small company, and they had 91445, and I said it wouldn't be a bad idea, because they were talking about communication and like how you do it, and we were talking about management reviews and all that kind of thing. And they said the client actually said it wouldn't be a bad idea to have kind of something similar in across the board. And I said, well, yeah, you're right. It wouldn't be a bad idea at all, because the other standards talk about communication. But obviously, 45 is explicit around, participation and consultation explicitly. So yeah, it wouldn't be a
Yeah.
bad idea though.
Because I
Yeah,
suppose the other standards, it's more of a one-way street, isn't it? But the 45,000 makes it a bit of a two-way street in that sense, doesn't it?
yeah, exactly right, and I think that's one of the things that people I've kind of certainly found when I've been auditing. You get to the this clause, consultation and participation, and you ask the question, how do you go about that? And typically you get kind of a response such as, oh, we do toolbox talks, or we give people this information, and so on and so forth, which is obviously good stuff, which is valid and relevant in terms of communication. But it's kind of really kind of just pushing information kind of one way, whereas the whole intent of the clause, and when you read the spirit and the intent of it, it's about getting that interaction and feedback from workers, I guess. And I guess that's a number of reasons, really. One, because the standard asks for it. Two, because you're actually legally required to do it. There's legislation around participation of workers. But also, as well, you find that if people have been involved in a process in terms of, establishing it and what's required of them, they can tend to maybe be a bit more what's the word, eager to participate, or a bit less resistance to it, when they've actually been,
It
involved in it.
impacts them. Yeah, it
Yeah,
impacts them, and yeah.
yeah. If they've been involved in saying, okay, well, this is a problem, and if they've been involved in the solution making, or at least the perceived solution, then okay, well, it's difficult to argue against it if you've kind of been part of the solution or the decision making
Yeah,
process. So
yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah. Yeah,
and
I
it's
don't
not.
like that. Well, you come up with it. Well,
Yeah,
yeah, but that doesn't matter. Yeah.
we put it out there as well, and that's the thing. I guess that it kind of comes back to across the whole standard, kind of the more people you have involved in things, and it's not about making everything a committee decision, but it's about collectively, like, you see people sometimes, like you talk to individuals who are trying to manage and operate a system. They're like, oh, I'm not sure what to come up with or what to do. And you say, well, if you thought about asking others, because like, they might have the solution there and then, and it's the more, you don't want to make everything a committee decision process, but certainly more people who are involved can. Sometimes you've got people who are, particularly when it comes to health and safety, you find some people who are really kind of keen and got some good ideas, and what, but haven't necessarily got the forum to do it. And that's the
Mm.
that's the other thing I've discovered. So yeah, they say, oh, we invited so and so to get involved, and they come up with this brilliant idea, and you think, well, there you go, it was sitting there. The knowledge is in the organisation all the time, but it's how it's the forum for extracting it out that you tend to find is missing. But yeah.
So you said there is a legal requirement for it. So is that the main driver? I know it's written in the standard, but there's a legal requirement for consultation
Yeah,
participation, is there?
I believe that the requirement around the legislative requirement is more around like participation of workers, so kind of get them involved in the decision making. Whereas obviously, like it's kind of it's linked together. Like, you could argue, well, to be involved in the decision making, you've got to get someone's view and opinion. So it's, whereas the standard obviously expands it out a bit more and uses those two particular words. But yeah, it's yeah, so it is just hugely important, because particularly when it comes to health and safety, it's about like culture and attitudes and those kinds of things. And when you're trying to change that within an organization, or kind of understand that and improve it that within an organisation, you can only really do that with people's kind of involvement and support. Because otherwise, it becomes could be hard to change a culture with just one person driving it. Because otherwise, you're seen as that person saying, "Oh, flip's sake, there they are again," kind of telling us all what to do or health and safety, and it gets that kind of negative. It becomes a bit adversarial rather than trying to make it part and parcel of what the organisation
So is
does.
it just for employees, or is it anyone so maybe contractors that you're dealing with? Is that what it involves? It should be everyone?
Yeah, well, the standard 45001 calls, it doesn't actually use the term employees, it uses throughout the term worker. So that's kind of any person or persons providing a service for and to and on behalf of the organisation. So that can be, yeah, direct employees like PAYE, but also I guess like, subcontractors, agency workers, whatever it may be. Obviously, I guess when it comes to contractors and outsourcing, need to be a little bit careful, but it's because there may be some obviously information there. But the idea is that if someone's working for you, within the organisation or for the organisation, kind of that forum is there, that information is available. And I think the other key thing as well, the standards explicit. It talks about non-managerial workers involved in the process, obviously, and that's the key thing, because sometimes I see the process. Oh, you talk about, oh, we've got a committee in place. Oh, who sits on it? Oh, the health and safety manager, the director, the this and that and the other. And it's, well, obviously good, fantastic that that's happening, but the standard is explicit around non-managerial workers being involved in certain parts of the process. So yeah,
Yeah, because otherwise it doesn't really change anything, really.
that's right. Yeah,
You only know what you know, and you're not the hands-on people, I suppose. Well,
I
what
think.
about if they use like a supervisor or a foreman or kind of a leader manager that's passing on the information? Is that acceptable?
Yeah, I mean, the standard talks about, again, kind of, you've got establish and implement and maintain a process for consultation and participation. And also it says, and where they exist, work as representatives. So the idea is that if there is a representative, like a health and safety representative, for argument's sake, that forum needs to be open to them as well, because it could be that you might not necessarily want every worker coming along. You've got to make it available, but you might say, okay, well, our worker representative is going to feed that information back or backwards or forwards within the process. So I think the idea is the standard's been quite realistic, because you could have an organisation that's got like 5,000 employees, and you can't have everyone descending on a big town hall meeting. It become like chaos. But the idea is that there's a mechanism there for people to be able to I think express their views, kind of feel that their voice is being heard, and that information is being considered as part of the planning process. I think that's kind of what's important, and yeah, that's the key thing with it.
Okay, so it's quite different from traditional top-down safety management, isn't it? Where it just flows down. It's definitely trying to emphasise that
Very
two-way
much, yeah.
street.
Yeah, I think that's the thing, because you've got within an organisation, you've got an awful amount of knowledge and people doing jobs. Because I think you've got to remember, it's a lot of places work is being done outside of maybe a head office. Say if you've got like a construction site or something, there may be things
Mm.
happening out there that just aren't visual to people that are arguably maybe setting policy or making decisions. So, well, okay, how are we going to implement or decide an effective policy if we don't know what's happening out in the real world, dare I say? So that's the thing. So and I think that the other thing to remember as well, the standard's kind of quite explicit. It talks about, it actually splits it between the requirements for consultation and separately participation. So, for example, consultation is about kind of, involving people in determining, it involves them in determining the needs and expectations of interested parties, establishing the policy. So that's from a consultation perspective. So getting people involved. But then when it comes to participation, it's kind of, it even talks about, it talks about identifying hazards, determining actions to eliminate those hazards, and so on. So it's really quite kind of explicit. It's all there in black and white, for people to see. But it's
So they're kind of two distinct things then, are they? That
yeah,
it's not as one, consultation and participation is two separate kind of activities.
that's right. Yeah. So when you read into what the standard's asking for, it talks about consultation, and there's an explicit set of half a dozen. No, it's actually 9 different requirements that the standard talks about, and then a further 7 when it comes to participation. So it's quite explicit in what it talks about. And I think, yeah, so in terms of mechanizing that, it's people do it in different ways. Like I think if you've got a smaller organization, one I was at just today, dozen people, pretty straightforward. Everyone can get involved, and they can have like sort of catch ups over lunch, and it's quite an open forum, But obviously, that's not always practical for some other organisations. But yeah, it's just important that it's. I think the non-managerial bit is the key thing, and it's just and it's the standard talks about when you're doing it. There's particular things that it says that the organisation needs to do, and it says about providing mechanisms, time, training, and resources. So it's I think the idea is that you remove barriers to people being able to voice their concerns or opinions and that kind of thing. So yeah. You can't just say, "Oh well, everyone's flat out busy. There's no time." Well, that's not an excuse, it's got to be there. It's yeah. It's
Okay, so toolbox talks and safety briefings, which are obviously a lot in construction, but other companies do use them. I was a manufacturing company and they use toolbox talks. Do they count as consultation? Is that permitted?
I think it can do. I think, like I say, if you think about the definition of consultation, kind of seeking people's views. So I think as long as that forum, if you're going to use maybe a toolbox talk or whatever it may be as a forum for basing participation, as long as that forum allows for people to be able to feedback, like you say,
Feedback.
it's not just that one way. I'll do this, do this, do this. It needs to be that mechanism for providing information back. And also, as well, the other important thing, which sometimes gets lost, is once the information does come back to by whatever means to the relevant person, what he's done with that, because there's nothing worse, I'm
Oh yeah,
sure, than saying, okay, we've got this concern, yeah, okay. Unfortunately, there's nothing we can't do anything about. Even if people are told that, okay, we've considered it, but we can't do anything at this moment in time. The fact that it just goes into the ether and disappears, that can be frustrating for workers, certainly. It just disappears and
yeah.
nothing happens with it. So, yeah.
Yeah, so I suppose safety bulletins are a little bit one way because you're just putting information out. Where toolbox talks, you're kind of interacting with the people, aren't you? So
Yeah.
there can
Yeah,
be that flow.
definitely. Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, that's the thing. I think as long as it provides that, like I say, as long as it provides that mechanism, time and resources, and there can be other things factor into it as well. Clients we go into just recently, and because one of the obstacles that the standard talks about is, it talks about one of the actual standard says determine and remove obstacles or barriers to participation and minimize those that cannot be removed. And it says obstacles can include, funny enough, failure to respond to worker inputs or suggestions, language or literacy barriers, because it just may be that some people just don't feel kind of able to participate. That kind of thing can feel
Yeah, okay.
a little bit restricting. If you've got someone who says, oh, I'd like to be part of that, but I feel that I might not be able to because I can't get my point across or something like that. Well, okay, is there another way of approaching it then? Is it just simple as suggestions or anonymous emails and all that kind of thing? I see people using an awful lot of apps and things nowadays where they can report things just anonymously and it gets into the system, and just whatever works. You can use technology to your advantage. It can be because I think everyone's sometimes not that confident in putting their hand up in a room full of people. Think they might have a
Yeah.
brilliant idea, but not necessarily feel confident enough to suggest it because they can't maybe get their point across in a room of their peers, so to speak.
Yeah, I went to a client not too long ago, actually. Client, I think you're going to join me next year. They got QR codes around all their sites, and then anyone can scan the QR code and it opens up a form and it's anonymous and they can basically write anything they want, submit it, and then it goes off to their chic manager. And he reviews them. But yeah, it was anonymous, but I thought that was quite a good method because obviously they're using contractors on site as well. And yeah, it was open to anyone. Yeah. So yeah,
Definitely.
it's
I
kind
think
of
as well
good.
sometimes because people use like they have like maybe health and safety committees and those kinds of things, and sometimes it's a client the other day, and I just said, I know within our industry, Mike, we have kind of like within certain committees that we have, not health and safety, but we have like terms of reference for like people that participate in things. And I said, and I said, you may want to consider as an observation, just introducing like a terms of reference document. I called it that because that's a term that we use, but like
Yeah.
just what is the actual committee responsible for, like, and what do they do? Because you might have someone they're sitting there thinking, I'd like to sit on that, I'll be part of it, but I don't really know how much time it's going to take, kind of what's involved, what is expected of me. But it might be a way of kind of opening that door, but
Yeah,
yeah.
it's that fear of what is it? What is it exactly? Where
Yeah,
that can break that barrier down. Yeah, that's a good point.
that's exactly it. It's lack of understanding of what's expected, or what someone might be sitting there thinking, yeah, I really want to get involved, but I don't want to stand up and do a big presentation. It might be, no, you don't have to do that. It can be whatever form it takes, and I think that's the idea. You reduce those barriers, make make the process approachable. Kind of put friendly faces in there. Whatever. Or, I think the other thing as well with that kind of thing, you might find, I don't know, maybe well, whatever sector, but say you move construction, they might have a really good working relationship with like their site manager or something like that, and say, okay, well, okay, you don't need to go directly to your manager to do it. You could just talk to that person and say, well, okay, as long as the information gets through, it doesn't really matter how it's achieved, because there's different, different levels of people might feel comfortable talking to someone more than one of their other colleagues than they would someone else, but it's all down to, I guess, recognizing that and how you're going to make it work. So yeah.
Okay. So
Yeah.
what's some of the ways companies, I'll say, unintentionally fake consultation? Is they think they're doing the right thing and it's not actually right? There's some.
I think maybe probably it's kind of, I think maybe the biggest thing is maybe we've already kind of touched on there. It's kind of just pushing information out rather than, oh, here's our information, oh, we put that on a notice board, oh, we send that via an email, but kind of we whatever it may be, we send out a safety bulletin, which is all good communication. It's not that it's necessarily bad or ineffective, but I think the key part of the process here was getting that information kind of coming back and getting people involved in that. I think, like I say, those two things, that their views and the decision making process. And I think that's maybe like I say, the biggest sort of misunderstanding is kind of, oh, it's just we've given everyone information, but and you can't, so to be fair to some organisations, a lot of people, they say, well, we tell people, but no one really wants to take part. You say, well, okay, but you can't say, you can take the horse to the water, but you can't make it drink. Say, but that's all you can do as long as you're seen to be able to sort of make time, information, and resources available. You can't do much more than that. So if ever the question arises from an interested party, okay, how did you try and do this? Well, this is what we tried to do. And it's yeah. So I think
Yeah,
it's
here's
not. I
some
think the key.
evidence to back it up, and yeah, this is what I
Yeah.
tried. Yeah.
Certainly, yeah, that's it. It's just that kind of, well, this is the time we make available. We give people information, training on this, and saying, okay, this is, just a means of doing it. But it's yeah, it's not easy, because sometimes you do get people, like I say, very very keen to express their views, but it's human nature, I guess. And I suppose the trick to this is just making it as approachable and as effective for everyone as you possibly can. But yeah, not easy, not easy when you're dealing with like personalities and interests, and some people just want to do their job and get home, but it's which is fair enough. But at least you've shown to be trying to achieve it. That's all you can really do.
So how can organisations move from telling people about safety to involving them in that sense? Yeah, because some people are just going to be willing, some aren't. Is there
Yeah.
something people can do to try and encourage, change that mindset?
I suppose it's maybe kind of some people. I think maybe one of the fears, if when it comes to these kinds of things, is, oh, is there kind of a consequence or kind of a reprisal if I've said something, or is that going to lead, good or bad? And when I say bad, I mean they've seen some bad behaviour or something, or a hazardous work practice, and they think, oh, I don't want to get anyone in trouble. But the whole, in actual fact, it's a requirement in the clause that it says that one of the barriers can be fear of reprisals or consequence. You've got to kind of say, well, okay, whatever you do, it doesn't matter, because even if it's not about kind of blaming or kind of pointing the finger. It's about making a safer and healthier work environment. So I think yeah, just kind of maybe that can be a particular barrier, if you like. So make it more
Make it
attractive to
clear.
make it clear. Yeah, I think that's one, that your voice is going to be heard. Two, that when the voice is heard, it's not going to be any, for want of a better word, like negative consequence or reprisals. You can say, don't worry, you can suggest it, you can do it anonymously, but whatever people feel comfortable with. It's shouldn't be a fear of reprisal about the process. Certainly not. So
Yeah,
that's
because you
kind of
want
one of
people
the.
to come forward. At the end of the day, if they see something, they spot something, see if something could be improved, they come forward. It's quite important, because I know
Definitely.
no business leader wants to end up in prison, do they?
Well, no, that's it. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So you take away, and even it can build into other parts of the standard as well. He talks about the standard was obviously got around risk and opportunity, not health and safety risk, but obviously system and process risk. So the idea is that if there's a risk to people not understanding or having you might find someone that's got a colleague who doesn't necessarily has not absorbed, or it hasn't understood what's said to them, and it might be because maybe they understand or read things or learn things in a different way. So it might be, okay, well, that's got to get fed back, because not understanding something is a risk to the system, isn't it? If people aren't sure what to do and how to do it, well, okay, people have got to understand.
Yeah, I mean, especially if you've got people that obviously in our case, English isn't their first language, that could be a barrier, can't it? And people might be fearful of, well, I'm not going to understand this, so you've got to try and
Yeah, definitely.
somehow,
Yeah,
pictures,
yeah.
you know,
Yeah,
pictures
visual
tell a
things.
thousand
Yeah,
words.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah. And particularly, obviously, you look around when you look into the clause and it talks about hazards, identification, actions to address them, and so on. Oh, and it talks about determining what needs to be communicated, and also as well another key thing to remember within the clause, it talks about participation. Involvement in decision making when it comes to investigating incidents and non-conformities, that kind of thing, a key thing, So obviously you can't have, you can't have an entire organisation investigating an incident, but certainly, the opportunity needs to be there that 'cause if there's an incident or an accident and someone's been hurt, obviously it needs to be investigated properly. It may be that someone's seen something. We'll make sure the right people are involved in the investigation process, because you don't just want to have someone, health and safety manager, really, just looking at it.
I'm from head office. I'm here to help. Yeah,
That's it, yeah. That's it, yeah. I'm kind of like, I'm going to investigate this. Don't worry, everything's under control. Well, why not speak to the people that are actually involved, and obviously, and say, well, okay, what happened? How can we do this better? What's the steps we need to take? Because it might be that they were doing, they're following the procedure, but the procedure or the arrangements or whatever it may be, or the method statement, whatever system of work, and it may just be that that's just not suitable and sufficient. Okay, well, how do we learn from this? I think that's the key thing. It's how does it leads to supporting improvement of the management system, achievement of objectives, and there's so many parts of the standard that it can lead into. It's not just about consultation and participation. It's like all clauses in the standards, certainly 45, but all the others as well. They don't stand in isolation, or certainly they shouldn't do. They should be kind of how does it all link and correlate backwards and forwards. In actual fact, which I'm sure everyone will now, when you read the clause in the standard, when you look at the sub-clauses, it actually calls out to other parts like objectives, leadership, communication, and accident investigation, non-conformities, and so on. So it's really, really important that those kind of people look at not just the line in the standard, but also kind of the clauses that it relates to, and that think, oh yeah, okay, then it becomes a system rather than just something that we do, rather than a standalone. So, which is
so
obviously
this is a
critical.
bigger requirement than what people may think and what you may first look at, isn't it? It's
Yeah,
small, but it has big impacts, and like you say, it spreads over many clauses.
correct. Yeah, 'cause like you say, if you've got people involved in the process, that can lead to, it may be that you might consult with your workers and they might come up with a fantastic health and safety objectives. You might be sitting there as an organisation thinking, blimey, what do we want to do? How can we improve? It might be someone sitting there with an objective that can push into that, or it might need some training, or it might need a better means of communication, or it might need a better operational control, or a means of responding in an emergency. There's so many things that it can factor in, and I think it can be difficult to kind of, you don't want to, like we said before, you don't want to make everything a committee but making decisions, but certainly people need to be involved, and because it can be more
So,
effective.
yeah, so it's important that frontline workers, the boots on the ground, the people at the cold face of it, are kind of involved in that hazard identification and risk area.
When you think like a policy set by and set by leadership and signed by leadership and top management within an organisation, well, the only way you're really going to achieve that is by having everyone have the culture there that supports it and engages with it, and by doing that, it's all part of this. Getting communication, certainly, but I think that's why it's a separate clause. You've got communication, yes, there needs to be those mechanisms, but consultation and participation is I don't want to. I use it under caution. Like, it's not a standalone clause, certainly, but it's an explicit clause. It's got some explicit things in there that asks you to do as an organisation. So yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So have you seen participation improve safety culture or reduce incidents?
Good question. I suppose I would have to say kind of, I couldn't give an explicit example, but I would say that kind of I think people have seen it as certainly a positive thing in terms of that it's kind of people that were, I think they just see it as a means of just supporting that, kind of what they're trying to achieve. That's the main thing, and ultimately that does include, reducing the health and safety risks and hazards and so on. So yeah, trying to think of an example, but yeah, and I can't think of one off the top of my head, but certainly yeah, I think people see it as a positive thing, kind of getting people involved.
So have you ever seen something that sort of changed the question slightly, where someone's just done a fantastic job of it and you thought they've really embraced it. That's a really good system that they've created there. There's a lot of participation and, sort of consultation?
I think with like a lot of the clauses, it's driven by the whole top management side, the leadership side of it. I think you kind of, if they seem to be sort of engaged with and kind of supporting the process, I think there's some of the best times you see these systems working well is when you see people going down like leadership tours, people like leadership kind of going down onto the shop floor and
Hmm.
engaging directly, that's always seen as a positive thing. And because people say, well, blimey, here they come. But I guess it's kind of personalities as well, how those things people approach it. But I've seen that be a positive point as well, where, kind of leadership, top management, if you like, go actually down onto the shop floor, out to sites and engage and see that, okay, what do you think? What do you think? How do you feel?
Yeah. So it's not bits of paper coming. There's a visual presence of the leadership team actually. Yeah, they write all this stuff on the paper, but we never see them.
That's it,
It
yeah.
means nothing. Whereas if they're actually down there and not necessarily getting dirty, but meeting people face to face and talking to them, that's a better process, and they're likely to get more sort of forthcoming participation and things like that.
That's it. It's kind of like, it's kind of like exactly what you say there. It's not just, oh, this is something else they want us to do. Yes, obviously there has to be that distinction, and because that's the way that companies are structured. But ultimately, if it's kind of, if you go to someone saying, well, look, we're thinking of doing this. What do you think? And some people might be intimidated by that, kind of might not want to, if there's a director or whatever it may be, an MD coming into place. But again, it comes back to how that team is perceived within the organization. That's a cultural thing. It should be people. You can't be all kind of. There needs to be structure and hierarchy. Of course there does, but I think it needs to be seen to be an approachable, non-adversarial kind of like management and leadership. That okay, you can do this. It's not a problem. The door's open. Don't come and pester me every hour of every day, because obviously there's structure within an organization for a reason. But ultimately people need to be seen to be approachable, and I think as well, Mike, it's what done with the it's how, as what we said earlier, how that information is dealt with and processed. And it not say, oh blimey, yeah, they come around, they ask us a load of questions, make a load of notes, but nothing really changes. And that's kind of that can be seen to be. And I realise there's obviously there's cost and time implications of everything, but even
Yeah,
if
but I
it's like
think,
what
yeah, I think even in that case, you at least feed back to them that say, look, great idea, we just can't afford it at the moment. So what we're going to do is this. I think it's that at least telling them that, we've heard you, but we
yeah.
just can't do it right now. So I think that's the bit, isn't it?
That's the thing is, the voice has been heard, and it's okay. There's something, there is someone or something listening to kind of what you're saying, but it's okay, and it's but we can't necessarily do this. But how about this, or looking at a workaround or whatever it may be. Just getting people involved. Kind of because like we said, those people might come up with a good solution. They might come up with a good problem that maybe hasn't been considered, or they might come up with another way of thinking. And it's very much at the standard, like most clauses. It's not explicit on how you do this. It's up to the organisation, the size and shape. What works well with one may not necessarily work well with another. Because it's not you're dealing with personalities ultimately. So which is always challenging.
Yeah,
Always
yeah,
challenging. Yeah.
definitely, definitely.
Yeah, and that's it.
Okay, so
Yeah.
kind of the key thing for people is try and break down that barrier, try and let people know that this is what we're trying to do. We want to improve it. So that's really what managers need to do when they get out there to just try and break that barrier down and
Definitely. Yeah.
encourage people to step forward.
I think so, yeah, and I think it's just remember those kind of those key definitions, consultation and participation. Sometimes they can be seen as interpreted as maybe being the same thing, but they're quite separate and distinct, not only in terms of definition, but also in terms of what the standard actually asks of those two kind of two activities, if you like. So yeah, and particularly so non-managerial consultation, participation, and when you read into there, like I say, there's like half a dozen, 9 points on one and 7 on the other, that says okay, they need to be involved in this process. Yeah. So non-managerial workers, all workers, so yeah, anyone, be that temporary or just there for the day, obviously you've got to take these, be sensible, but yeah, it's yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Okay,
Yeah.
that sounds good. So one last little thing then. What's the one thing that businesses could do to improve it? One tip that straight away I can do it tomorrow just to improve the whole consultation participation process.
I think probably what an easy question would be. Literally, just ask your workers. How should we do this? What do you
Yeah.
think? What do you
Okay.
like? Literally, I know that's probably like because you actually kind of by definition, then you're meeting the requirement of the step. Just say, look, what would work for you? What
What
would
do you
really work for
want?
you?
Yeah.
Yeah, what do
What?
you?
This is what we
Yeah.
want to do. This is how we, the standards asking, but what we want to do.
So look,
How would this work for you to get you to, come and join it? Yeah, that's a good idea.
we've got to do this. We've got to do this because otherwise, if we don't do this, we're not going to be in compliance with the standard. So we've got to do it. So okay. So what would be best? And you might get everyone. You might get everyone. Show of hands or whatever it may be. Everyone says, yeah, I want a committee that gets held once a quarter. Yeah, brilliant. We've been aching for that. But it might be actually, that won't work. Or we want more one-on-ones, or we prefer this. I think just literally by asking that one question, you are consulting. You're literally kind of, it's just, yeah, what works for you. I think rather than like a health and safety manager sitting there and trying to think of, how am I going to do this? Well, go and ask the people. How am I going to solve this problem? Well, go and ask someone. And it's like so many things. Like I'm sure, even like from a quality and environmental perspective, blimey, I'm struggling to come up with some objectives. Well, what do you think? How could we be better?
Mm.
How could we make people safer? How could we make people healthy? What do you want? Do you want a mental health first aider? Do you want a committee? Do you want this? And obviously, I guess it comes back to, like we're saying, it's down to time and cost and everything that goes with it. But you can't sort of say we've got no time, because that's not really what it's all about. Time needs to be made available. So yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's like the simplest tip ever. Just go and ask someone. It's true. It's
It's,
very true.
I would ask him, yeah, but I think it's, having said all that, it is obviously, I realise, particularly at the moment, there's an awful lot of challenges going on with our businesses and financials, and that probably the last thing people need is time being taken out of a work day. But it doesn't need to be like a big, kind of hour-long meeting. It can be literally just little mechanisms that are, quite sort of, kind of easy to implement and take forward. Just start with something simple. A suggestion box, whatever it may be.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
which not everyone's got. I know it's a silly thing, but it doesn't need to. It'd be cheap and sometimes effective. So,
Mm.
but
Yeah,
yeah,
definitely. Yeah, it's
yeah,
just like I say,
yeah.
scrap of paper, write something on there, put it in a box, anonymous, and yeah.
That's it. Yeah, there's no right or wrong way of doing this. The only wrong way is to sort of essentially not do anything at all. And that's otherwise you start to struggle. Because from an auditing perspective, obviously you need to see, well, okay, how are you approaching this? And it's it can be difficult. I fully appreciate. It's not necessarily easy, but yeah, it doesn't have to be difficult. But
Yeah,
yeah.
brilliant. No, it's good. I think it's been useful. People some tips, simple things, broke it down, made it pretty simple. So yeah, it's
I say
good.
you kind of obviously, trying to just give like a bit more kind of openness. What we're looking, I mean, the standard's not a secret. It's sort of, we've not said anything that's, some hidden art that, oh, that's great, we know about that. It's all there, but it's just, I think, ask the question, and also kind of, I'm sure people do, but yeah, just read the standard and kind of, see how it interacts with other parts of the standard, certainly. So yeah,
Yeah, cool, brilliant.
sure.
Okay, appreciate your time.
Not at all. Pleasure, as always.
Yep, that's been good. Brilliant.
Lovely.
Thanks, Martin.
Okay.
Catch you soon.
You're welcome. Take care.
Cheers. Bye
Cheers.
bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.